This is my Group 3 racing lawnmower, and over the last season we have made incredible progress, making both the mower and myself a load quicker. But the past year has been tough on this thing.
It snapped.
So we're going to tear down the entire mower, completely strip it back to absolutely bare metal, and then build this thing back up to be better than ever. Now let's get started. Right, hello, we're back on this. I have a new addition. We'll see how this camera angle goes. I'm going to go over the whole mower, take a load of stuff off, see if there's anything we need to fix with the mower still together, because you want to know how everything goes together before we're going to take this whole thing apart, strip it completely down, get it powder coated, get the whole thing looking beautiful, and then all back together. And we're going to do the whole thing in this video. So to start the tear down, we're going to get the seat off and get everything removed. The whole of this is going to be all the stuff we regularly do on a race weekend to keep this thing running. So most of it is 13mm, 8mm bolts, all the standard stuff. So 2 rose joints off, and the seat comes off. Again, that was still wet and muddy from the last time. Now, you wouldn't believe it, but this mower's already been jet washed down. But just to get some of the mud off, you have to basically strip this whole thing apart. So that's what I'm doing here. Removing this rear mud guard. Again, this is going to get cleaned up, shot blasted, zinc coated, and then powder coated. So we're going to try and get most of the mud off for the guys that are then going to do that before we then pull this off the mower and get moving on to other things. Yeah, you can see just how bad the mud is. So once we clean that down, we're then going to get the rear clutch assembly and the actuation setup off. Now, if you want to know more about this, there's more in my Group 3 build playlist, where you can see the entire build for this mower for last year. This year is going to be an iteration on that. We're going to try and improve it in a number of ways. There's going to be a little bit of weight coming off, a few small upgrades on the running gear, but to be honest, I'm happy with most of the mower. And then there's going to be a few big visual upgrades and the little nice things I like to add to the build I make. So we're then going to get this clutch top off. There's 3 M6 bolts and then 1 M8 that holds the basket down onto the T-drive shaft. So we're going to get that removed. Again, liberal use of our Lidl impact gun. And then just trying to get this off. A little bit of WD-40 in there. And we're going to get all of this stuff cleaned up. The plates replaced later on in this video. And then the top hat and pulley system is then going to come off. That was a little spacer we've removed there. And then just rock this off. And by the sound of that, I think this bearing needs some work. That bearing is very done. Let's write that down and replace that. And we're then going to remove the rear hubs. Now, I want you to notice that these hubs are set back from the end of the axle. Now, this axle is made for slightly different wheels than I'm running this year. First of all, we're going to pull out the keyway and then this spacer that I've only just added on there, really, to hold the wheel on. We had a problem in a previous race, so this is fixing that. And then we're going to trim this down. Because I'm running Oki wheels, link down in the description for any of the parts I mentioned in this video. The offset is slightly different, so the hubs sit further back. I only run these wheels, so it makes sense for me to cut these off just to make things a little bit neater and save 50 grams for whatever that is worth. The battery died on the angle grinder, but we're going to go and finish that off a little bit later. Now we need to drop the oil out of the T-drive. I'm going to remove all of this, but actually while the T-drive is held up in the right position, I may as well drop the oil out of it. Here I'm running a magnet through there just to make sure, to see if there's any wear particles in there. The gears in there are made of steel, so if there is significant wear, I'll see it. I didn't, so that's all good. We're going to get the bung done back up so it doesn't rust, and then we're going to get started on our next thing. All right, we're back working on my bug. Now, I have a bit of an update on this. I've managed to find someone to powder coat it. Apparently loads of them didn't have ovens big enough for the main chassis. So I found somewhere in Swindon, the Coat Works, who are going to be doing it for me. And I now have a deadline to get everything prepared. Now, one of those things is going to be to get all of the bits off of the engine to get sorted. So I've got, for example, the fuel tank holder. I've got all these extra little bits, as well as the engine plate that I'd like to get powder coated, so I need to clean them up, get them ready. And then also, this fuel tank isn't my favourite. I think it looks ugly, and it's also in all of the camera shots. So I've ordered a new fuel tank that we're going to have to make a similar bracket for. You can see where the fuel didn't like this foam. So I'm going to make a new bracket with new foam and everything to go on there. So next thing to do is to tear down the engine. So on the side of here, we've got the fuel tank holder that we built last year. This is holding our 4.5 litre tank. We're actually going to change that tank later on in this video, but this is one of the things I want to get powder coated. There we go. So this mounts off the starter motor bolt. So that's that. It's got to go back in there. That's all going to get replaced this year, so I'm not even going to bother touching that. The fuel bracket is going to go in my very advanced cleaning system, which is the jug of petrol. Now to flip this thing over and get everything off the bottom of the engine. Now here we have, first of all, the exhaust. We have to run these standard exhausts, and over the season you can see it's had a lot of abuse and gone a little bit rusty. Right, now this gear on it, this is just on a taper lock, and the keyway that's in the shaft here loves to jump out, so that's why I've got a clip on there, and these Allen keys. Oh, there you go. So now with some WD-40 to now get this taper lock off there. Again, I'd left it wet, which is something you shouldn't do. Now this should rotate off. There we go. Lovely. So now to get all of these bolts off the bottom of the engine to then remove our engine plate. And while we're here, just because we're here, we're going to clean everything up so it's ready to go on next time. There we go, here are two things to clean up. So we're on to more cleaning, and this is something you're going to have to get used to if you're getting into lawnmower racing. Everything gets filthy and there's nothing you can do about it. So the whole thing has to come apart to then get it cleaned. But so that's all not looking nice and shiny. And before everything gets powder coated and we're kind of locking in the form, if you want to think of it that way, I'm just taking the time to polish off some of the edges. So on this tank that was built very, very quickly between meetings last year, I'm then going to take off all the sharp corners and make sure it's looking nice. It wouldn't be a build video without heading over to Paul's. So we had a crack in the chassis here, just where a bolt hole went through. So we welded that back up and then ground it back. Same here. We've got a new plate to fill in that hole that was previously there for the pedal spracer. Filled that up, weld it, and then ground it right back. So the next thing to do was to get this loaded up and take it to the coatworks in Swindon, who are going to be powder coating these panels. So the first thing to do was to shot blast it to really clean up the surface and get rid of the excess paint. Then we acid dip, because that orange under there is powder coating from 10 years ago that we need to get rid of. And then it was going to get baked in an oven to create a really hard-wearing, long-lasting finish that will be way better than this paint I already had on here. Something very exciting has just happened. My parts are ready to collect. So we headed over to the coatworks and look at this. That 50-year-old chassis is now looking the best it ever has. Incredible finish on here. And I can't thank Lloyd enough. So it's all powder coated. It's looking beautiful. Not only did I get the chassis done, the body panel, the A-frame, all structural stuff, I got loads of the little bits done as well. In terms of cost, it cost 300 quid to get powder coated. So it was shot blasted, primered with the zinc layer that Lloyd recommended, especially for these high wear areas that get beaten up all the time. If you look at the old chassis, you can see what that can do. And it cost 300 quid for the whole lot. Let me know what you think to that down in the description, but I'm very happy with it. Let's get this thing built up. Now there's going to be a couple of areas like this where there's powder coating built up where it shouldn't have been. Lloyd masked out these holes, but on this outside edge there's going to be a lock nut there, and that is one of the critical dimensions for setup. So I'm actually just going to take that off with a flappy wheel, although I don't want to take a grinder to this straight away. It's going to be what I'm going to do. Now I am screwing these in, and I have known dimensions here that I can reference to get this exactly right. That's the top. Now here was where we uncovered our first issue. There was a bit of shot in the thread, so I needed to order a tap to go through and clean those out. all to be expected, but it was one of those things that stopped me putting together the front of this. So we'll start working on something else. So this is going to be the first thing to go on, and it's the steering column holder. And of course we're going to use some shiny new bolts. Oh my god, look at how nice that looks. It's going to be a little bit tricky because I don't think these holes got blanked. So some of these were a little tricky to get in, but once we got through the powder coating it was all okay. And look at that. Lovely and shiny. Won't last long like that, but anyway, you got to do things nicely. And the next thing is these steering lock stops that go on the front there. So next is going to be fitting the steering column through here. So I'm just going to put some assembly grease in here, drop that in, and then we're going to have the two collars to nip that up. So next is our new steering column. We actually got this made last year. It's made out of a Fiat 500 universal joint, welded onto a shaft here, and then we've got these stops that hold it in there. Check out my new shiny bolts. Just as excited about the bolts, to be honest.
Wowee! Look at that shine.
That's going in. There we go. So there's just a square fitting on there, and then this gets done up. And we have the lock nut. So this steering system I all inherited from the previous designer. And now you can see how those lock stops work on there. So the next thing is going to be to get this engine all sorted so we can drop it onto the chassis. First thing to go on is going to be our lovely shiny engine plate. Later on we'll discover a problem with powder coating this engine plate, but for now let's get it on there. Next is going to be our lovely new fuel tank holder. So that is going to sit up in there. Very excited. This was only made a day before the whole lot got powder coated, so that's going to go on next. So time to get the starter motor bolts out, and then this new bracket on here. I love how this thing looks, and it's going to hold this fuel tank much more out of the way. Also a fair bit lighter than my previous one, so all incremental gains we're making through this rebuild. Now quickly, while we're talking about incremental gains, I do have one thing to show you. Yes, I'm cutting 50 grams off the lawnmower here and there, but it occurred to me at Christmas, after I'd just eaten a load of food, hang on, I'm probably carrying around 15 kilos of weight I didn't need to be. So I've also fixed that. So in this clip here you're seeing I weigh 93 kilos plus my kit. Now 3 months since Christmas I've been doing a calorie deficit at 14 to 1600 kilos. It's fluctuated a bit, but that's been roughly my average to try and get that weight down. I'm really pleased to say that the results have been pretty good. I've dropped 10 kilos since then, and I think it's going to be a bit more as we carry on. But I'm throwing everything at it this year. Every opportunity to make things faster, I'm taking. Back to the video. This is something that's really important in this sport, is just every winter making this mower better. Everyone else is going to be doing the same, and it's the only way to push on forward, really. So the next thing is to get the engine on, and then the A-frame in. This is held in with these M10 studs, and then another M8 on the side here. We're really starting to see the shape of this thing come together. And then the steering rose joint, I'm going to put some Loctite on here because we do not want that coming loose, and then just a bit of grease in there as the shaft does spin inside the rose joint. Not ideal, but we're lubricating it as well. And then here was another spot where I forgot to tell Lloyd to coat that. And then here we've got some Loctite on this bolt, because this is one of those bolts you don't want coming undone. And then to tighten everything up, and we're starting to see the shape of this come together. Next is to put together the clutch pedal. Now this actually came from Jean Alesi's Ferrari Formula 1 car. It was one of the prototypes that the previous owner of this designed, that apparently Jean Alesi didn't like. So now it lives on my lawnmower. So we've got two M6 screws now in the side of this lovely powder coated clutch pedal. Right, so I'm waiting on a tap for the front end to sort that out. So we're going to move on to this rear axle. Now, along with my extensive haul of AliExpress parts, I bought new bearings to go in these pillow blocks. So I inserted those the other day, cleaned them all out, made sure they're full of grease. They're going to go under here and carry the rear axle. First thing is the T-drive holder. Lovely powder coated. Looks awesome. And that goes up under here. So time to get this rear T-drive mount on there. And again, because of the powder coating, there are a few things that don't fit super right, but that's fine. That will kind of wear off as we put these bolts in. Putting this rear axle up is actually quite tricky. You've got to hold it up there and get all the bolts lined up. So I do them all up loosely and get the thing hanging in there and then kind of add the bolts one by one. And I found that tends to be a good way to do it. So time to put these big M10 bolts all the way through. And then the ones up through the bottom, and then again back in that out so we can get the other bolts in. This one here used to have a brake mount on it, and so it's a slightly different setup. There we go. After liberal use of the impact gun, that rear axle is on. And now time to fit the hubs. So I run these spacers to stop the hubs moving around. And then the keyway, and then the hub on there nice and tight. Same on the other side. I had to mark this one because I kept getting them the wrong way round. And then the mower would be illegal, like based on overall dimensions. So I've got all that on. And then once this front panel is on, it's time to start getting all of the pedals and accelerator and brake sorted. So this lever runs through the chassis deck and then has the accelerator pedal on. That separate section is for the spring to hang on there, so it's got several tension settings. And then again, because of this powder coating, I've just got to rethread that to clean out those threads. And then this lovely titanium part, again, I can't claim credit for any of this. This is all the previous owner. And this part threads in the side here. And then we've got a new pedal that I have made, and you can tell because it's just a piece of cut up angle line here. And then I'm going to put some grip tape on that because it makes sense to do it now. Lovely transition, Callum. And then again, cleaning out some powder coating before we get that onto this axle there. And then we've got the throttle pedal going on again. All right, back out for another day. This seems to be taking forever, but that's always how it goes. So, job for now is going to be to get the clutch system on. So that requires a cable that goes to the back of the mower. We're going to fit all of those and the various brackets that go on there, and then move on to something else. So because this needs to move freely, and there's two freshly coated powder coated surface, and then this big bolt, it's going to go through there. Oh, that's going to need some screwing through. A little bit firm in there. Right, so this is just going to chip on there if I keep doing that. Now I want to look and see. Yeah, I'm going to put some of this thick adhesive rubber on there to stop all that. That is on there. Lovely. Next is the bracket. This is the piece I'm missing that actually holds onto that cable. So that goes in, there you go, like that. Into here. So this again is titanium and holds the clutch cable and also allows you to adjust this. So that just needs two screws here. Oh, there's a hole there. That wasn't there before. The sandblasting must have blown a hole in there. So both ends of the cable now secure with this mounting on there. We now need the spring holder to apply some tension on, and we're going to put that on next. To that side. That's ready now for the whole clutch assembly to go on. And just tidying everything up with that cable, keep that out of the way. And cut them a nice angle so I cut myself on them regularly. Perfect. Now onto the brakes. So we've got the brake caliper holder here. That hangs off the cutter deck at the back there, and then also has another support. They took some hitting through. I went at that. But now, once we got those clamped on... Right, good morning. We're back out on this. This feels like it's been forever, but I've been waiting for this. This is a tap so I can clean the shot blasting media out of the threads on the front end and finally build up the front end. So by the end of today, this should be sitting on all 4 wheels, so time to crack on. So some of the sizes on this mower are imperial, so that's why I didn't have the tap to hand, and this is the sort of stuff we're trying to get out of there. So now we've got that all out of there, we can now fit these. So I marked these when I took them off, I know exactly how far they go in. Yeah. Now obviously these widths are all part of setup. You can change your camber angle, also the overall front track width. So I made sure to measure and record when I first took these off to make sure I can get it set up how it was last season, because I was really liking how this thing was handling at the end of the season. And with a few of these upgrades we're putting on in this video, I'm really hoping it's better again this year. So it's finally time to fit this front end. Now if you didn't see my videos last year when I first rebuilt this bug, we had these made by Alan, a local engineer. Now how these work, so that bottom section sits in there, and then a screw goes in through the top to locate that. So the issue we've got here is I forgot to tell Lloyd, the powder coater, that all of this needs cleaning or needs masking. So we tried to clean it off the best we can, but there's still some in there. Now I do actually have a new tool for that. So here we go, saw this in Lidl, a battery rotary tool for £25, and I couldn't say no, and then 2 days later found a perfect use for it. And then these screws actually have a shoulder on to create that bearing surface that sits inside here. Oh, that is nice. Get them temporarily in, check everything's okay, and then we're going to Loctite that up. So 2 M8 screws to go in here. Now getting the tension on these right is really important, because you can have them too tight. So just lubing that up and making sure everything moves freely, and again that will free up as we get going. And that side is on. Time to do the other side exactly the same. Now for the tie rods, and I was having to gamble a little bit on which side went on what side to get all the tracking right, but eventually got it okay. So these again go in with 2 M8 screws and tightened up on the back just to make sure nothing comes out. Right, an exciting bit now. So time to get my R&M steering wheel on. These are very good, especially for Group 3s. And just this lock nut on there as well. And then you'll see there is a new addition on the wheel, but we'll get to that in a bit. So with the steering working, there we go. It's going to be time to put some wheels on this thing. And then these locking nuts are M14 we're going to thread on there. And I like to do them up until they're tight and then just back quarter of a turn so it spins freely. I have got new bearings on the way for this, but that'll do for now. There we go, so we have wheels on here and it steers. It's got wheels on it. Get in there. So with that all looking shiny, it's time to get the rear end sorted. So we're going to start with the clutch system, a spacer going on there, again with a new bearing inside this top hat. And we're going to use some bearing lock to keep that all seated nicely. Then the clutch basket and all the plates going in once we finally get that aligned. And then we've got the keyway and then the spring system. And then here's the actuation system that uses a small dowel. You'll see here there's a cam in there that means it actuates it as the lever is pulled. Then we've got this clutch system like holders that go on here. And then a new belt, which goes very badly for me. With that done, we then got this going on. And then this clutch system back on the top here. Once we've got that new belt on, lovely shiny one. The last one actually lasted me almost all season last year, so hopefully this fresh new one will do the same again. Oh, this is exciting. Oh. Definitely not getting overexcited about that. Then the 4 bolts that go in to hold the bottom of this on. The seat holds the top on, so all that system goes together. And now we've got a silhouette coming together. Next thing is this electronics panel that goes on here. We've just got a rev counter, the engine cutoff, and the battery starter, the starter motor button. And that will go to the spark plug once we've got this engine on. Again, we've got our new fuel tank and holders on there as well, all from AliExpress again. And that is it with the engine on. So I'm at Paul's now because we're working on the other big video I've been working on. We are not just doing one build video on this channel this winter. We've got two things going on. These tyres I've been running for the last season have slight cracks in and they're letting air out. They were basically all of last season going down slowly. So I bought some new tyres online, and because Paul has a bigger compressor, they're easier to put on the bead. My little electric hand compressor isn't man enough really. I'm gonna try and get these old tyres off before we then try and fit these. They can be a real pain to get on there, so we'll see how it goes. Now, I cannot exaggerate, without the correct tools, this stuff is so hard to do. To get these tyres off after they've been on there all year, it is an absolute pain. So I actually gave up filming here because it was such a pain. But anyway, Paul helped me get those off and then get these seated back on the bead with his compressor. Right, we're back on the Group 3. We're kind of in final push territory here. We still are going to get these stickers done on here, but I want to get everything finalised so that when I take it to do that, I know it's like the finishing touch and I can show you it all finished. So the first project today is going to be to get the seat fitted and sorted. So there are two M8 rose joints that go on here that then go on these seat holders. And we're just getting all of those done up nice and tight, and then these two bolts hold it into the chassis. That means it can hinge up out the way. One of the common issues you'll have on a race weekend is a belt going or the clutch going or something like that, so getting to the rear end really quickly is important. So being able to hinge this up out the way is really great, and that's why we have those pins on the back, so I can just pull two split pins out and the whole thing comes out. So yeah, the seat was absolutely minging from last year, so I absolutely soaked it in all-purpose cleaner and scrubbed it and scrubbed it and scrubbed it. The last thing I wanted to do was have a lovely new paint job on the mower and then put a gross old seat on there. Time to get the brakes connected up. Just put everything on loosely. There we go. And then this goes through a hole in the chassis just here, so that pokes through that. Now this is one of those jobs you think is going to be really quick and never is. So I was doing this up. They have these connections that kind of clamp the brake line in. This is an old karting cylinder. There we go, that's finally tight. That was a right faff. Now to do the other side. So we're going to get the caliper all done up and that connected nice and tight. Now I'm going to lift the front end up to make bleeding much easier, but this all went a bit wrong. Because that was so tight, I managed to pull it off the brake line. So I'm having another go at getting that all done up nice and tight. Okay, we need to connect up the linkage now to get everything working. So here is my DIY brake pedal. Just a piece of angle line cut up, and I found it worked really well last season, so we're going to stick with it. So we've got this physical linkage to the master cylinder. That all goes on there, and then we've got the other end going in with a split pin. And I'm going to have everything loose on there. So I'm just putting in the two M8 bolts from the back side of the chassis, nice and loose, so I can make sure everything works correctly. Time to open the bleed nipples so that the fluid can go all the way through. Now I put a cloth down to make sure we're nice and tidy, don't get brake fluid everywhere, and then I go and pour brake fluid everywhere. Right, so because this is the top of the system, I'm going to leave that open. Now I'm going to attach this and see if we can apply some pressure and see what it does. The bleed nipples are looking soggy. There you go. We are getting air out. Oh, we're getting air out of everywhere. It's coming out of there as well as out of here, so we're going to have to check all of this. Right, I've just had the camera off for a minute because I had to take that entire thing off to solve the brake line leak. But because we don't have the syringe, I left it at Paul's, it turns out. I'm going to have to do it this way. So I've got the front up high. I'm going to drop brake fluid in here. I've got both the bleed valves open and they are both the lowest points, and this is the highest point. It should all flow out to get rid of most of the air, and then we can try pumping it to see what it does. But I'm going to let a fair bit come out the bottom to make sure we've got all the air out. That's the idea. Right, let's put the lid on and see what that does. So lid on, and I'll put some pressure on and see if I can get any consistent streams out of there. So I'm just using some brake pressure to try and push all the air and fluid out the other side. And we started to get some progress there. That will do for now. Right, so it's another day and I've got the electronics to figure out. I hate this bit. So it's going to be a case of getting the main core components all in. Let me show you them. So we have the battery that powers everything. We're going to have power going through that to the starter motor, but obviously there are some things in the way. So the main switch that powers on the power to the starter motor is this. This is a solenoid. So we have the power coming from the battery into one side of this, out the other side of that. And then this plug here is the small 12 volt, which goes to the button, which controls when that starter motor gets engaged. For safety, you have to have a battery cut off. So this is going to go on the side of the mower with this key in there. So we have those, and then obviously some battery cabling to do this. So I need to rewire. Obviously this is all done and ready to go, but I just need to get it all rewired and rehooked up. So let me do that. So we already have the holes for this to go in the side here, and then we've just got an M5 screw that goes in to retain that. I think it should have 2 screws, but I think 1 is perfectly sufficient on there. Next is the wiring. That goes on there as the earth. Now I need to clean the powder coating off under here to make sure we have a good ground. So time to scrape off some powder coating again. Great filming, Callum. But the last thing we want to be diagnosing in a field is a dodgy ground, so we make sure we get that right first time. Then this cable actually runs through this hole in the chassis and then to the positive terminal on the battery. That battery, I should mention, is just a standard motorbike battery. Now we have this tiny little cable that goes from the battery cutoff and then into the solenoid. So you can see the battery cutoff interrupts the positive feed. So we're just crimping that on there to make sure they don't come off. Solenoid next. We have another situation here where this hole is not only a mounting for this solenoid, but this is also the grounding. So I'm going to have to make sure this grounds out nicely, which means scraping off my lovely powder coating again. So time for the rotary tool to make itself useful again. Just got this round head on the top there, and I'm just going to scrape off enough that we have a nice ground here. Mostly inside the bolt to do that. There we are then. So this comes from the button, which is up here. That's going to run down here onto that. And we have one more connection now, which is from the solenoid. So once that's switched, it sends power all the way through here up to the starter motor. Next thing, this. So this is the engine cutoff. When you buy one of these, you can get one of these from Lawn Mower Racing or Alibaba. When this comes out, it will kill the ignition. So this is so if you fall off, then your cutoff, which is on a lapel, comes out of there and kills the engine. But this needs an earth, so I may as well share the same earth. So that comes in here and goes on the same mount as the solenoid. Now we've got one more cable. This goes from here up to there. And then another one of the rules is that all of these terminals has to be covered. So I'm just putting these insulated boots over the terminals to make sure that can't ground out. Same for all these other connections I did the other day. We're going to go through and add all of those as well. So next problem I'm tackling is with the start. Now I have everything connected up. Everything should be working. All the wires are in the right place. But when I hit the button, nothing happens. And it took some thinking to realise what I've done. It's that. We have power getting to the starter motor over there. But obviously what the engine does, it receives power from that and then it's earthed through the chassis like a car. And what I've realised is that I have the engine sat on a powder coated plate, which is then sat on a powder coated chassis. So again, I'm having to earth it. I could scrape off the powder coating, or I could buy something and do it, maybe not neater, but do it better. So what I've done is just bought an earth strap, and now I need to find a place to put this. This is the shortest one I could find on eBay. So that goes in there. Yeah, I think that's pretty good, guys. What do you think? Let's see if this works. There we go. We've got no fuel in it, but we know that works now. The next thing is to do with the fuel tank. Now, this came with this hose, and it has like a tap on there on the fitting on here. Now, when I tested this before, this fitting does not flow fuel very fast, even when it's fully open. So what I've bought is a fitting that should go on there. I think the thread is correct, but let's see. Now, this might seem slightly excessive, but the last thing you want to do is to be down on power because of some silly fitting that came on your AliExpress fuel tank. So I'm just making sure with this nice wide open one. Eventually I got that threaded in, and then that doesn't fit on my lovely blue fuel hose, so I'm then going to add on this black one just into the filter to make sure we have all the fittings correctly done up. So that's all done up and sorted there. Right, it's time to put the gear on. I'm going to go with the 21 because I think that's what we ran this event we're going to first last time, but we'll see. But I've got to put one on, so I'm going to put this on. So with the mower up on its side, I'm going to put the keyway in first into the engine shaft. That transfers the power into the gear here, which is on a taper lock system. You can run pilot bores, but I run taper locks. And then these two grub screws go in to lock that together. Well, we know my oil breather is working because it's all come out all over the floor. Then this Jubilee clip to stop the keyway coming out. And I remember for my first ever race meeting, that was one of the things that happened. The keyway came out and I lost drive. So we'll make sure that doesn't happen. Time to put the belt on. Time to get the seat back on. Good. Bolts back on. So on the seat, there's one thing I need to explain. This time, because of this nice new paintwork, I've put rubber on here, and previously the seat did always hit and slap around a bit. So that does mean that this is higher, and these retention pins I'm going to have to remake. So I'm going to pull them out and put new bolts in and remake them. And then one thing I forgot to film was this throttle assembly all sorted out. So that now works. Next thing is to finally sort these seat pins. So a bit of Loctite going on here. I went for some M8 threaded bar in the end. It's not the tidiest, but it's what I had. And then these pins fasten that in. Now, next thing we're going to add is a bracket I made for this V-Box Sport unit. Now, V-Box are lending this to me, so I'm not going to add it to the tally, but to see what I think. It's their most rugged data logger. This records to an SD card, 25Hz GPS, and will also relay that to this iPhone 6, which is my wife's nan's old iPhone. And with a £20 app, we're going to have a Delta on this screen. And we'll see if we'll be able to read it and make use of it. But anyway, next thing to do is to fasten down the battery. Last time I had a ratchet strap on here, and now I'm just using one of these AliExpress straps that we're going to add on. First thing to do is to get that out, and then I use these sort of square coach bolts, I believe they're called, that sit in there. And they're narrow enough that they sit next to the battery and aren't intruding on it. So we're just going to push this strap through there, do that up nice and tight, and then we're going to do these bolts up to cinch that down against this battery cage, and then do that up nice and tight. And that battery, wait for it, isn't going anywhere. Oh. And there it is with everything done up, all connected back up again. Now, time to add this grip tape. Now, I'm not going to show you me cutting that out because that's boring. But this I also got from AliExpress, all stuck on there nicely. So there are still a few things to do on the lawnmower, but I'm at a stage where It's a lovely day. I've run out of jobs I can do right now, so I'm going to see if I can get it started. It's all new fuel system, new carb on it, so it's not guaranteed that this will work first time, and there might be some troubleshooting, but let's get into it. So we're going to get some fuel into this new tank. I've still never filled this fuel system up, so new breather on the top there as well, you might have noticed, and then seeing that fuel filter fill up. Fuel on. That's all working. There's a bit of air in the fuel system, but that should clear itself out. So the engine cut-off going in to make sure we have ignition, and then we'll give this thing a try. Okay, we'll go for half choke, and then right. There we go. Now we have this thing running. First thing I noticed though was it was idling a little bit high, so we'll try and figure that out. So I dropped the idle screw down, but nothing was happening, so I figured the throttle cable must be a little bit tight. So we'll just go to this adjuster. There you are, and you can hear the revs drop down. And then we can go back and fix what we were doing with the idle screw. In the first place, you can see everything spinning nicely, how the clutch system works. And now onto the seats. Right, so I got some of these as well from B&Q this week because I don't want this bar running into me. I had a similar thing set up last year. I think this one's okay. Normally, like that folds over before you hit that. So I just need a piece that comes over here. So I think I'm going to run with something like this and then run some tape around that. So we're just going to get the back of the seat removed. That just has one screw to get that on and off. And then just try and test fit this before I then make a cut to see where it's going to be. Lawnmower races are very particular about seats, and that's for very good reason. So once that is cut to size, I'm then going to use my new favourite tape. This well stick stuff is like £10 a roll, but it's fabric and it's really strong and it sticks to anything. I absolutely love it. And I'm just actually using some loom tape. This is this fabric stuff to go around there and kind of tidy it up and make it look a bit fabric-y or whatever. Just before we round out the tally of what I spent this video, there's one other thing I bought, which is this. I'm very excited about this. Now, one issue I have is that on a sprint race meeting, there's loads and loads of races. Now, in between it, because you don't want to carry loads of fuel around, you have to fill up the fuel every single time. That means getting a funnel out, there's fuel everywhere, jerry can, whatever. Sometimes that's in the pit, sometimes it's by the side of the circuit. Now, I saw Dino, who's a very experienced racer, had one of these. I thought I have to get one of these. So you've got a fuel carrier. Basically what you do is fold out this nozzle. It has a safety stop on here. You pop that in the fuel tank of the mower, and then this dispenses the fuel, and then when you're done you just let go, fold that up, and there's no spills, nothing, and I can keep that. Will be a weekend of fuel. 6 litres is more than enough, so I think that's really cool. 45 quid. I think it's a good buy. Now enough of that tangent, onto some stickers. Right, it's an exciting day. I have some stickers to put on this. Now, I did have a plan of trying to get a karting sticker kit made up, but it looks like that's not going to work out. I've had these cut out. My sister Evie did these for me. She's got a Cricut like cutter, vinyl cutter, and she's done these for me. So I think these will look good. I've just got to go and stick them on correctly today. First thing though is going to be to clean with some brake cleaner, because there is a bit of oil on the mower or whatever from where I've changed the oil and done that kind of thing. So we can get these stickers really stuck on there, because last year they came off quite quickly. But I have a plan for that. So Evie already applied this to this transfer tape, so I can just cut them out and apply them. Some of them are a little bit close together. Now, one rule in lawnmower racing is that you're not allowed any proper sponsors to keep the racing nice and cheap. So these are all just random logos. I think a lawnmower or a racing thing, a car always looks better with some logos on there. So that's why I've gone for these. And just with the transfer tape, applying that, pushing it on, and then we'll peel this off and see how that looks. Many more stickers to go on here. Now here we go. Here is the website you need to go to if you're looking to get into lawnmower racing. So I thought, why not stick it on the back section of the chassis here? So again, we're going to lift this up so we can see it a bit easier. And this one is going to be a bit more involved. I'm going to just measure this out to make sure I can get it lined up horizontally and vertically. Right, just giving myself reference points there. Rough width, rough height. Now to offer this up and transfer this sticker on and then peel this off. And this permanent black vinyl from Cricut stuck on there really nicely. So that is stuck on, happy with that. I had one issue last year where, because the stickers were on the outside and they're only normal vinyl, they're not anything super sticky, whenever anything rubs up against them, they come off. So I had Sean, another racer, recommend something. And it's this stuff. This is mountain bike tape or helicopter tape or whatever. And I bought it in this nice wide format. You're probably thinking this is all a bit anal now, but I'm doing it anyway. Now we've cut it to size and we're just going to try and push this on here. Now there is one thing, this tape is quite thick. And it meant applying it evenly was pretty tricky. It's struggling to conform to this, so I'm just going to try a really distant heat. So I'm just going to very carefully use this tiny little blowtorch just to heat it up and painstakingly push in all of these gaps to make sure we have this evenly stuck on there. And get it to stick. It'll only look worse if it's not stuck on there really well and evenly. So I've gone over that and let that sit, and over time that actually looks really good on the back there. Now one thing to remove is this little section. I'm not actually cutting through to the paintwork. All I'm doing is scoring the PPF like the clear film, and then you can pull it out. That one better than I thought. And yeah, that happened better than we thought. So we're not going to cover all of the sections with that clear coat. Here, for example, doesn't get much wear, so I'm going to leave that as it is. And then the sides are going to be up next. This is the part I really like of this. It's the one spot that kind of your eye is drawn to. So applying this logo slightly changed from last year, and then sticking this on, and then again with the PPF going on the outside. This one was much more even because the surface finish was much better. Again, then ran a knife along the top and then just using the heat to blend that edge in and to have it really stuck on. Just that bit of heat helps the adhesive really stick. And then I'm going to cut around the edges. Here the light makes it look much worse than it actually is, and over time it's stuck really nicely. Now just to apply these numbers. On the front I like to cut the number down just to limit on the amount of space it takes up on the front of the mower. And then 2 new bolts to go on there. And it's starting to come together. Right, so we have all of the stickers applied to the mower. Before I show you it in its entirety, I have a few things I've been doing off camera because they're boring. So I've attached these pins. These mean I can pull them out and fold the seat up and away. I've tidied them up, got that all sorted. Camera mount on there because I like having a rear facing camera. I've added the V-box on, so that's all ready to go. And then everything is generally tidied up, and look at that. Really happy with how that looks. Right, you might think I'm mad. I'm going to try ceramic coating this lawnmower. The reason being, it's as clean as it's ever going to be right now, and cleaning lawnmowers is annoying, and I do it between every single meeting, and trying to get all the mud off is such a pain in the arse. You end up scratching the lawnmower to try and get it all off or whatever. Obviously I've put the stickers and everything's on there, but I'm going to put this over the top. It creates a nice layer that should protect it and also make it easier to clean. Let's see. I'm going to try on one of the body panels first. So what you've got to do, I just read it, I've already just cleaned this with brake cleaner. Going to work left to right, up to down in small patches. Once it flashes, wipe it off with microfiber. Now, if you didn't already think I'm crazy, you really think it now. Anyway, we're applying this up and down, left and right. I can see kind of in the reflections how far it's covering, and being careful not to leave it too long before I wipe it off. And then the back of the seat as well. And I'm just going to go around the entire mower. I'm not going to show you everything. I'm going to go underneath around every single nook and cranny to make sure I can just spray this with water, and all of the mud is going to come off after a muddy race meeting. There we go then. So everything is up and going. All feels really good. Now I was going to test this mower at the end of this video, but I'm running out of time with the first weekend coming up, but it does mean you don't have long to wait. Hit subscribe because the first race weekend is coming up, and we'll see how this thing does. Thanks for watching.